you can see my screen. So again, this is one more 4 p.m. of lecture, and today, our focus is to help out the Angular beginners. This is a very, very focused session. I can see that some questions, which are coming around around this topic. That is this an advanced session? No, it is not an advanced session. It is completely for beginners who want to quickly start with Angular, who want to run their first application, who want to see the Angular screen and understand the fundamentals of Angular. So it's a very basic session, which is for Angular beginners. But I'm sure that if you are an Angular beginner and if you say that you want to quick start, then this 1 hour will help you, right? So good evening, everyone. Let me know if you can hear my voice. If you can see my screen, I have flashed a small notepad out there, Angular for beginners. And we will get quickly started. So there is a question from Jagdish Shiva here, which I can see. Is this Angular session, are you going to teach everything? In 1 hour, definitely it is very difficult to teach everything, right? For example, in Questpond, like we have these trainings of Angular which goes on. It goes on for months together. Like I have the recent Angular training, it is going on for past 4 months. So Angular is a very vast topic, but the goal here is to quickly get started, understand the basics. And I'm sure that if you get the basics, you can learn from Questpond or you can learn from anywhere else you want, right? So let us quickly get started out here very, very quickly. I'm going to go and first, what exactly is Angular? Let us talk about it. Let's discuss about that. What exactly is Angular and how to get your first UI up and running, right? Now, Angular is a binding framework, right? So a binding framework means, let me go quickly on the screen out here and so here, now what really happens is when you are writing HTML code, right? So let's say that this is your HTML. Let's say you have input, type, text, and something. Must be you can have a lot of these kind of input type text, so you can have customer name, customer code. So one more text box, one more text box. You can have a type button, right? So you can have a button out here. Now, this is your view. This is your HTML view, right? And you have a kind of a model at the back end. A model means, for example, assume that this is a kind of a supplier view, right? Assume it's a supplier view out here. So in the supplier view, assume that this is the name. Let's say this is the supplier code text box. So when I type on this text box, you want to go and update a model. A model can be a simple class out here, like saying class supplier, right? With the properties like, let us say, the name of the supplier, right? So now what you want to do is that when you go and type out here, you want to go and update this name property out here. You want to go and create an object of supplier. When you click on the button out here, assume that this button click, on the click of this button, right? You want to go and invoke a method here, add. So add means you will actually go and add it to the database, right? So in other words, this is your view. This is your model, right? I'm using the word model, but normally this model will have a business logic, right? You now need to write some kind of a code behind, or I will say unbinding code in between. Unbinding code which says that connect this text box to this name, connect this button to this name, right? So basically, you have a view, you have a model, and you have a code in between which you term it as a view model, right? So when I type on this view, your view model captures the events and sends it to the model. Now, really what happens in reality is that the model is almost very simple. If you have ever worked on a project, you will understand that when you open up a class, right, it is so simple. Class, set property, get property, clean methods, right? When you click on the view, that is also very much clean, like text box and buttons and div tags, pretty much clean. But this part, this binding code out here, this code behind this controller, there are lots of names to this view model, right? That is extremely complex. So what Angular says is that you don't have to worry about it. Angular is a binding framework. For example, if you look at Angular 1, for instance, if you go and if you look at Angular 1, right? if you look at the way Angular started, remember that we have two big versions of Angular. One is we have Angular 1 and the Angular 2 family, right? So if you look at Angular 1, when they started Angular 1, which is termed as the angular.js. So if you go to this website out here, and if you see at the top, you can see at the top on the title bar, I don't know how I can, or must be I can just show it over here in the Google, right? You can see this angularjs.org. Look at the title. It says we are an MVW framework. So when they started Angular 1, right? They started Angular 1. This was the initial reference, which was almost a lot of years back, you can see, right? So in this, they say that we are an MVW framework. MVW means you have a view, you have a model, right? And this W, because some people call this code behind as a controller, some people call this code behind as a view model, some people call this code behind as a presenter. I remember that I am from ASP.NET Web Forms. I used to call this as a code behind, right? I remember some people talking from Lisp, that this is a gel code. So what this W stands for is whatever you term it, right? But we will help you to simplify this binding code. And that is the only big goal of Angular when it started a lot of years back, right? But afterwards, Angular became very famous. People started loving it. So they started building routing. They started building validations. They build the material. And then today, Angular is the most popular framework, what you can see out there, right? So, so very quickly, so in Angular, so just quickly, how does the simplification happen? The simplification happens as follows. If you do not use Angular, then your code will be something like this. Input type is equal to text, and then you will write some method here saying on change and so on, right? But Angular says don't have to worry about this. They give you something called as directives. These directives are magical keywords. If you put it, if you attach it to an HTML element, the behavior of the HTML element changes. So over here, I have to just go and write ng model is equal to supplier dot name. This is a pseudo code, please understand. I've just tried to make it very simple. So now what will happen is automatically what Angular framework will do is he will create an object of Angular with the name sup, right? And he will bind this property out here to this, bind this text box value to this property automatically. So for example, now if you say here, let us say we have an add method out here, assume, right? So you can say, okay, button, click. Remember, it's a pseudo code. The exact code of Angular actually goes something like this, well, it is something like this, so I will not go into the square bracket and round bracket at this moment, but the point is this is a pseudo code. So I can say here click and call what, like supplier.add. Now you can see I don't have to write anything, all this binding code is all taken care, isn't it? So like if somebody goes and types on this text box, it will go and it will update this property. If something happens in this property, it will update the text box, right? Two-way binding, one-way binding. If you call the click, it will automatically call here. So the goal of Angular framework is removing the code behind, removing the controller, and implementing the binding framework, right? So guys, before we start, right, any questions at least on the basic part? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go to questions out there, and then after that I will come back and start running our first Angular application. Please note that this is completely for freshers out here, and I can understand that a lot of senior people will join in here. So must be, if you have any kind of higher level questions, please feel free to ask me, right? So so yes, so good evening, Mahindra, Rana, Aishwarya, everyone, Sudha, Ashutosh. Screen is not visible. I hope you can see the screen now. Right. So okay, let us see. I can see that there are no questions, right? So I think like, so let me know if any questions, at least on the conceptual part. So here is a question from Sudha. It's like traditional ASP. No, not like traditional ASP. It is more related to JavaScript, right? Angular is a JavaScript framework, so it is built using JavaScript. It is not traditional ASP. Right. So design side coding. Uh, See, the design is HTML, frankly. So the question here is that the design is complete in HTML. I'm talking about, that when I write something inside the text boxes, I want to go and bind it to the object at the backend. I want to go and bind it to the middle layer. I want to go and bind it to the business logic. That's what the goal of Angular is. Okay. So guys, let me go ahead and let me see some more questions. Okay, so here is a question. So the question is from Aishwarya that I just wanted to know that how to pass data between two controllers. So very quickly, Aishwarya, this word controller was used in Angular 1. The word controller was used in Angular 1. In Angular 2, the word controller has been changed. Very quickly, guys, I can see that some of the people out there are using the vocabulary of Angular 1, but today my goal is to teach you Angular 10. So my goal here is to show this demonstration using the new thing of Angular. So very quickly, in the old Angular, so we have the view, we have the model out here, right? In the old Angular, this code behind, what you have here, people used to term it as a controller. But now in the new Angular, this is termed as a component. So that is the first thing I want to clarify. So now the question from Aishwarya is that if you have one component out here and you want to go and pass data to the other component, there are various ways to do it. So just quickly answering that, I know that this is a basic session. So one is that you can create a shared variable, which is a very bad idea, but you can go and you can create one big shared variable by using dependency injection, and you can share it. Another is you can do component to component calling as well. So you can say that, okay, from this component, make a call to the other component, directly, and say that, yes, pass in the data. So there are various ways to do it. So people use either some kind of a framework like NGRX, which is again more better way of doing it. In NGRX, it helps you to share states and transfer states between the UI navigation as well as between the components. So 2-3 ways of doing it. One is you can do directly from component to component. Second is you can do by using a shared variable, right? That is by using a global object, or the much better way is that use some good framework like NGRX, right? Which will help you to do state management between the components out there. Okay. So let's see some questions if I can answer. So here it is. Can we consider Angular follows MVVM pattern? So Sanket, very much right. Angular is absolutely like MVVM. So if you are a WPF person, you must have always written that view model, which binds it. And if you look at WPF, so very quickly, the question of Sanket sir is coming from WPF. WPF, if there are anyone here from WPF, right, you guys have already tasted that MVVM pattern, right? So in MVVM pattern, we had that view model, which was we were writing binding code in that. And if you remember, in the WPF, we had the binding tags. We can say two-way binding, we can say one-way binding. Absolutely, this Angular has such kind of directives, right? Right. So can you please tell us how to reduce input and output component interaction when there are more parent-child components? So Ash, what I will do is I'll take up this question after some time. So let me just go ahead and run the first application, because we have a lot of people out here who are very much new to Angular, and I know that your question is a bit higher end. So I will pause that question, but I will definitely take it, right? So let's go back here and let us start. So first thing, if you want to go and run your first Angular application, here it is, install Node. Step one, I'll just give you must be today 5 or 6 steps to make your first application get started and make clear the concept. So step one, install Node. Let's not talk about what is Node now, right? Install Node. So to get Node, what you can do is you can go to nodejs.org. So if you just Google Node.js, so that's the Node.js, right? Now this Node.js has something called as NPM, Node Package Manager. So this Node.js has something called as NPM, means when you install Node. So if you see out here, the Node.js has 2 installations, right? You can install the latest features if you want. So you can install this 14 version out here, right? But in case you want a more stable version, if you are coding for an application or if you are coding for a live project, I would suggest you can go for 12, right? So once you install Node, inside this, we have something called as NPM, Node Package Manager. What exactly is this node package manager? This node package manager helps you to get dependencies of Angular. It helps you to get dependencies of anything, actually, any JavaScript framework, right? So for example, now, very quickly, I will go and create a folder out here. So let me go to my E drive and I can say file, new folder. Must be I can just make the fonts a bit bigger. So let me just try to make this 150% so you can see it in a better way, right? So here it is. I will go to my E drive and let me create a folder out here. Must be first Angular, right? So now let us go here to this first Angular, copy address as text, right? And let us open our command prompt. So I have already installed Node out here. And I would suggest that whenever you open the Node command prompt or any command prompt to create an Angular project, always try to run it as admin, right? So I'm going to go and run it as an admin, right? So there it is. And let me go to that drive, where I want to create my first application, right? So there it is. It's my first Angular folder out here. Now, first thing, just quickly check, first, do you have the proper version of Node? So you can say node-v. So I can see that I have the 12th version. 12th version, that is, I have an old version. So let me see. Okay, let me go and switch to the 14th version. You can see in my computer, I have two versions of Node, or three versions of Node actually. One is the 10th version, one is the 12th version, and one is the 14th version, right? So let me go and just switch to 14.11 so that I can just use the new version of Node, because remember that Node does not really belong to Angular. It does not belong to Angular, right? So if you want to do Angular 10, then ensure that you have the newest version of Node, because the Node, the NPM packager, the NPM package, TypeScript, all of this actually works in tandem. So if you're saying that I want to go and run the new Angular in the old Node, you will have a lot of issues, right? So I've just switched myself to the new version of Node out here. So let me see, node-v, that is a way to check the Node version. And I hope that now I have started using the 14th version. So that is good. So I have the 14th version out here. Now inside the Node, as I've said, that we have something called as a Node package manager, right? So that is also installed. So when I install that setup, the setup is already installed in my computer. So it has something called as NPM. I can quickly go and check the version of NPM as well. 6th version of NPM. So that's the latest one, right? So now the first thing is, in order to go and create a project of Angular, we have to install something called as an Angular CLI. So the second step, right? So the first step is ensure install Node, check the versions, right? So this is already done, right? Step 2, install Angular CLI, right? So go ahead and install Angular CLI. Now, how to go and install Angular CLI? You have to go and install Angular CLI using the NPM, the Node Package Manager. Package Manager means it helps you to get things from online. For example, you want jQuery. So you can say NPM install jQuery. So you can go and say your NPM install jQuery, and it will bring jQuery from online. If you say NPM install Knockout, it will bring the JavaScript framework of Knockout from online. So basically, it goes to the GitHub and gets the latest version, right? But at this moment, our main goal is to get Angular CLI. So Angular CLI. So if you go and Google out here and say Angular CLI, so this is the Angular CLI. To install Angular CLI, it is very, very clearly written. Look at the command, npm install -g Angular CLI. So you need to go out here and fire this command, npm install -g. -g means global. It will actually go and install a global version of Angular CLI in your project, right? In your computer. So that means that anybody who uses Angular CLI, he'll be using only one version, whatever is installed globally, right? So I can say here Angular/CLI, and we can install that. Now, please note that even Angular CLI has been installed in my computer. So really, I'm not going to go and fire this command out here, but I can just write down the notes. In the notes, I can say that install this as your second command. So npm install Angular CLI. Once you install Angular CLI, right, it will install the CLI command. CLI means command line interface. Means from the command now you can say create a new project, build the project, run the project, right? So in order to go and create a project, you can see that on the help also it has been written ng new and the name of the application, right? So the third step is you will go and you will fire the ng new command. So you will say here ng new, I want to create a customer application, right? So press enter. Oh, some issues out there. Let me run this again. I just changed my node version, so I'm not sure. So must be, I've just changed my node version, right? So that's why. Oh, that's so sad. It is. I think I need to now go and fire the command npm install angular CLI. It's strange. I do have the Angular installed, the CLI installed out here, but I'm not sure. So guys, okay, no problem. We still have more 40 minutes out here. This will hardly take 5 or 10 minutes to install, right? So you can see there it is, npm install -g Angular CLI. So this will actually go and install the Angular CLI in my computer. And then I can go and start firing commands. Oh, that was pretty fast, so good. So you can see that he has installed the Angular CLI 10 version, right? And you can see a lot of other messages out here. You don't have to worry about it until it is red color. If it is a red color out here, you need to worry. There is a saying in the market which says that developers don't worry about warnings, right? So you don't have to worry about this yellow warnings out here. Fine. So ng new. Now let us hope that everything goes properly. Customer app, right? So there it is. Now, when you say that you want to go and create a customer app out here, he will ask you a couple of questions. First one is that, do you want to add Angular routing? Okay, let me explain you what this Angular routing is. Angular routing helps you to do navigation from one page to another page. It defines the navigation of your application. So if you say that you want to go from here to here, from this UI to that UI, then you have Angular routing. Now, because we are learning for the first time, let us not try to get the routing code in right. So I'll just say no, and I will press enter. After that, he will ask you the second question saying that, what kind of style sheet do you use, right? So do you use a CSS or do you use an extended version of CSS like Sass or less, right? So I'll say, let us stick to CSS. CSS is a very common ground for doing UI development. So I will just stick CSS, and there it is. So you can see now it goes there and it starts creating, it has created a lot of files and it has started installing the packages, right? And if you go inside your customer app folder, you can see that if you go inside your customer app folder, you will find lots of files which have been created out here, right? And you can see a lot of these files out here. I'll explain what these files are, right? So very quickly, to create your first Angular application, you have to install the CLI, and step 3, you will say ng new and customer app, right? And he will ask you 2 questions, that do you want to do routing? Do you want to not do routing? Do you want to use CSS? So you can say routing is equal to no, and CSS is equal to yes, and create your first Angular application, right? So let me know, guys, any questions on this basic thing, what I've started out here. I will also take up some questions, which are more higher end questions, definitely. But the goal of this training is to help out more of the freshers who are trying to come in the market, right? So here it is. Okay, now let me take the question which was from Ash here. Can you please tell us how to reduce the input and output component? So guys, please put down the questions, right? And I will definitely try to answer them whatever possible. Input and output interaction when there are more parent-child components, right? So first thing, Ash, when you are using input-output, that means that those components are more shareable components, right? When there are more parent components and child components, right? And if you want to do the interaction, then I would suggest you to follow the view child, the content child, and other ways of sharing data or interaction. So if the same input-output you're going to go and use with somewhere, you have deep tree parent-child kind of structure, must be you can try to use the view child, content child, view children, and content children, right? If I have not understood your question, Ayesh, please put down more details so that I can understand, because from that question, it looks like it looks like that it's a half question, right? So if you can just put down more details, I can help you more. Uh, will it reduce input and output component interaction? Okay, so I did not get that question, right? Okay, so let me know, guys, any questions on how to, okay, that's a good question. Okay, can we create Angular app from the menu in Visual Studio? Very good question from Krishna sir here. Can I use Visual Studio to create Angular projects, right? So let me answer that. First thing is, yes, you can, right? And the second thing is that you shouldn't, right? So very quickly, here it is. I'll just open up Visual Studio 2019. The question is that, and I know that how it feels to be within Visual Studio, because I've been also a big fan, or I will say a kind of I'm kind of addicted, I'll say, rather, that's a very harsh word, but addicted to Visual Studio, that I want to get all the answers in my Visual Studio, right? But the problem is that Visual Studio is an IDE. It is made very specific for C#. When Visual Studio was created long years back, before even .NET Framework, if you remember those eras of VB6 and VC++, it was created for Microsoft related kind of things, right? And definitely the new Visual Studio as well, which was launched in 2003, that was also very specific to C# and so on, right? So definitely, it has very high caliber when it comes to C# applications, .NET applications, WPF, WCF, and your MVC and the new MVC core, right? But when it comes to Angular application, I would say that avoid Visual Studio and use VS Code, right? So yes, you can. So I can go and I can say create a new project. Here it is. And first thing, there can be a ready-made template of Angular. Let me go and search it. I don't know if there is anything ready-made which comes here, or there isn't, right? Okay, fine. So here it is. You can go and you can say ASP.NET Core Web Application. And then when you say create an ASP.NET Core Web Application, with that, you can go and you can select the Angular template. So here it is, an Angular template, right? But now but the problem with this template is that when you go and create this template using Angular, this template was created when Visual Studio 2019 must have been released. And when Visual Studio 2019 has been released, right? So let me go and create it. Why not just let's go and create it. So when Visual Studio 2019 was released, at that time must be the version was Angular 7 or Angular 8. So the new version of Angular will not be reflected out here. Then you have to again do things manually, right? But when you go through the CLI is awesome. If you look at the whole team of Angular, just to give you an idea, the whole team of Angular, if you look at Angular GitHub, the team of Angular, is not just the Angular core. If you go and see the complete project team, comprises of 3 sections out here. So you can see very quickly. So here, so this is the project on GitHub out here. So you can see first thing, this down below, what you see out here is all Angular 1. This is all your Angular 1.x, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.6, 7, whatever, right? This top one is all your Angular 2 family, which is now Angular 10. So Angular 2, Angular 4, Angular 2, there is no Angular 3. Figure out, read why there is no Angular 3, right? So Angular 2, Angular 4, Angular 5, Angular 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So this is the Angular, new Angular, what we have out here, right? Now, if you look at the whole team, right, this is the core Angular. This is what has all those code to do the binding and so on, right? Okay. This is the CLI. So you can see now when the team says I'm going from 9 to 10, the CLI team also migrates from 9 to 10 because they are one big team. They all belong to Google. They all work as a project, right? In the same way, we have this Angular material design here, which is for UI components. So in case of Visual Studio is a different department altogether. It belongs to Microsoft, right? So what happens out here, if you see now, here is a project created. And if I go and see in the Solution Explorer very, very quickly, if I go and see this, and if you go and just see, you can see here that he has created an MVC core project. And if I go to this client app out here, and if I see the version of Angular, how you can see the version of Angular, you can just go to this file here called as package.json. You will see that it is Angular 8, right? Now it is not Angular 10, right? But if I go to the one which where I had installed the CLI, if I go to this package out here, I'm expecting that it should be Angular 10. It is possible that for some reason, if the old node is used, I don't know, right? So there it is, Angular 10. So my suggestion would be that just stick to CLI, just stick to VS Code. Do not use Visual Studio, at least for Angular. That is the suggestion out here, right? So yes, you can do things in Visual Studio, but the goal is completely different, right? Okay, so that's the answer for one of the questions which was asked. Can I create Krishna? Can I create Angular app from menu in Visual Studio? You can, but you have to select MVC core and then select Angular, right? Okay. But Visual Studio may have the latest Angular version too. Now, yes, but then Sudha, you have to keep migrating. It's think about it that you are, let's say you are working on .NET Core 2.3.1, then even you have to migrate that as well. Are you getting me? So you have to migrate literally everything. So just keep that differently. It is coming from Google. It is separate. It has separate technology. It is on client side. Just keep it separately and keep the C# and MVC core and web API and entity framework separately, or else then you have to migrate literally everything, right? Okay. Okay, fine. So now let us go back. Let us go to the files out here. So let's move ahead. So so you can see almost we just need these 3 steps out here. Now let us say I want to go and run Angular application. We can say ng serve. So if you want to go and see your first Angular application, you can see that there is an error out here. Now ng serve command. So if you go and do a directory out here, ng serve command, you have to run from the app folder where it, within the app folder. Means at this moment when I did an ng new, you can see that he created a customer app. So actually we have to go inside the customer app and we need to go and fire the ng serve command. So I'll just say ng serve. You can see here, I have not used any Visual Studio. I have not used any VS Code, nothing, command line, just pure command line, right? This class is for beginners, somebody who wants to quickly get started with Angular, what needs to be installed, right? That is the goal of this class. So if I say ng serve out here, what this ng serve does is it actually goes and takes that complete project, what is there created, the template, compiles it, right? Do you want to Google privacy policy? What does it say? Would you like to share anonymous usage of project with the Angular team? No, at this moment, I just want to keep my privacy and say no, right? And process, right? So now, when I do an ng serve out here, what it will do is it will start compiling my project, right? And it will run the project and host it in a web server. So internally, it has a web server, a JavaScript web server, open source web server, where it will go and host my first Angular application. Okay, what is happening out here? Why don't I see? Let me terminate. Let me try again. For some reason, okay. Actually, it takes a bit time to start the compiler and so on. So to run the Angular application, we have to say ng serve. So step 4, to run the application, we will say ng serve, right? Okay. What happened to the compiler? Okay, I hope that the compiler will start. We'll wait for some time. But till then, what I can do is I can quickly help you to understand the various folders in this project out here. So that you can understand where things are. So very quickly, I'm going to go and make a snip out here. So this is the complete folder out here, which is installed, right? Which is created, right? So let us start one by one. This first folder out here is for GitHub. So in case you want to go and check in this into GitHub, so this folder has, the Git files, which is for description, which is for other things as well, right? So at this moment, you can just excuse it. E2E, this E2E stands for end-to-end testing, right? So when you say that you want to do testing in JavaScript, then there are various tools like Protractor. We have Jasmine, which is a unit testing framework, right? So you will find that wherever you find these files like spec files, these are all related to testing. So you can see there's a tsconfig.spec, a specification file, which says that this is a test case file. So this is end-to-end. This is a testing file to create test cases, right? Node_module. This node_module is a folder, wherein all your Angular basic framework has been copied. So inside the node underscore module, you will find Angular core, you will find Angular routing, all that thing, whatever you have installed via npm. Remember that internally it is npm which does it, but you can see here all the Angular. So all the Angular folders will start with @. So if you just go and search @ here, just @. So there it is, @Angular. So you can see compiler, the forms for doing validations, the CLI, the animations, the platform browser, everything is out here, the core and so on, right? So this node underscore modules, it's something, which is created after the npm. So what happens here is you can see our application is running. Once you do npm out here, it will actually go, and once you do ng new, I'm sorry, it actually goes and takes all the components which are listed in package.json file. You can see there is something called as a package.json file. I'll just open that. So in this file, we have all the dependencies what is needed to start an Angular project. So we need the animation, we need the common, we need RxJS, we need zone.js, right? So all of this, you will get it from online and put it into the node underscore modules folder, right? And this src is the folder, where your source code is. So your actual source code, which you write, the UI, everything is in this src folder, right? Now, very quickly, let me just go back here. You can see now the Angular application is running out here, and it is running on this local host 4200 port, right? So I can just go and copy this. I can say edit copy out here, and I can just run and see that my first Angular application is running or not, right? So Control V, and so there it is, my first Angular application. You can see that it has some home page out here and the application is running, right? Now let us do, so that means that this is the UI. So where does this UI come from? So where exactly this UI located? This UI is located in the app folder. So in the src folder, in this app folder, when you go to the app folder out here, you will find there are certain files out here. So very quickly, if you see here, I can just copy this. Let's understand these files, so cd, if you see here, you can see there are certain files which are mentioned out here. So let's try to understand these files out here. So I'm going to go and again do a full screen snip out here, right? So these are the files, right? And what exactly are they? So first thing, as I said, that Angular is a binding framework. So you have a view, you have a model, and the view and model are binded by something called as component. Remember this name here, do not use any other name like view, model, or controller, because it can confuse when it comes to Angular, right? So when you're speaking with someone who is working with Angular, right, just say it's a component, right? That's an official word coming from Angular, right? Angular team. So first thing, this component HTML, what you see out here is the view. That is the HTML. So this here is the view, right? This component file is this one, the component.ts. That's what that is. Currently, because this is a sample code out here, there is no model actually. So at this point, we do not have any kind of model file. Okay. This, as I've said, this spec.ts is a testing file. So we can just excuse this for now. You can keep your eyes closed on this. The CSS, very much self-explanatory. That is a CSS. So you can close your eyes on this, right? So the view, the component, right? And you can see that it says .cs, the .ts, I'm sorry, that TS stands for TypeScript. Now you can have many views and many components. At this moment, this is a sample code out here, but you can have, must be 5 views and 5 components, right? And you can group, 1 or 2 components into something called as a module, right? So this one here is the module. So you can see when you talk about Angular, you have a view, you have a component, and you have a module. So the basic structure of Angular is view, component, model, and a group of component is grouped into something called as module, right? So the module actually groups the components together, right? So that's the basic structure of Angular. So let me know, guys, any questions on the structure. So very quickly, what I've also done is in this class, I have explained you what exactly is a component, what exactly is a view. So this is not a step, but this is a theory part to understand things. Theory, component, view, model, and modules, right? And all of this is loaded at this moment in the app folder. Please note that app folder. So the way it works is, so at this moment, if you see, we have src. Inside the src, we have an app folder, right? And then you say app.component html. In real world, what can happen is when you start with a big project, people can do like this src, and they can say inventory app. Then inside inventory app, I'll say inventory app.component.html, inventory app.view, right? So inventory app, accounting app, right? At this moment, yes, it's a very simple structure out there. So that's why it is just app, right? And if you go and if you modify this component.html, let us quickly do that. So let me go to this component.html out here, and let me just modify it by saying that. So if I go and open this notepad, you can see a lot of things out here, which is actually displaying that hello page out there, right? So we can just delete all of this and say that welcome to our first Angular application, right? Now, when I go and save this, let me just see that I'm modifying the HTML only, yes. So now when I go and save this, that ngserve will run at the backend. So if I go and save this, if I quickly go to my command prompt out here, you can see that it has again compiled, right? So it has again compiled. And if I go and see my page out here, you can see that whole UI has been refreshed with welcome to our first Angular application. So that was the view. So that is the view what we have just refreshed and reloaded, right? So guys, any question on the architecture of Angular? So the different files, which are there, and what they stand. So if you have any questions, you can put down on the chat. We have 20 minutes more to go. And I would like to see that you understand how to run your first Angular application. I would like to encourage you to see that you understand the various components of Angular, the architecture, the basic architecture, and at least get started with Angular. So let me go and see any kind of questions we have out there. So Angular uses IIS to host application. Very good. No, Gaurav, Angular does not use IIS to host. It has its own web server. I'm not really sure what is the name of this web server, but it has its own web server. It must be some free open source web server out there, but it is not IIS, right? What are the necessary files to run Angular application? So Gaurav, you can see that whatever I have created using ng-new, those are all the necessary files to start with. I know that a lot of files you can remove from there, but I would suggest to not touch anything about the Angular. Use the CLI. Please don't try to escape from the CLI. Do not try to go and try to do everything manually. It will take days together, right? So whatever files are given by the CLI when you do an ng-new are needed to run an Angular application, right? Okay, so what are the necessary files? Okay, is it necessary to know web application to learn Angular? Yes, Pooja, it is very important that you should know web applications. You should know HTTP. Only learning Angular will not do. You have to learn some kind of an backend server like Django or ASP.NET MVC or JSP or something you need to know so that you can save it to the database and do some server-side code as well. So when you say a full stack developer, you have to know client side like Angular, React, or Vue.js or jQuery. And on the server side, you need to stick to something which you like Java must be, or PHP, or must be even Node, right? And my favorite ASP.NET, right? And then backend again, SQL Server. So a full stack developer really has to go across the UI, the middle layer, as well as the database, right? Request life cycle of Angular. It's a very good question. So there is no I think I can explain that. So let us not talk about request life cycle. Must be we can say bootstrapping life cycle. Let me explain that. So that's a good question. I'll take it up from Gaurav, that what is this bootstrapping life cycle? Request life cycle is different. So well, I will not say request life cycle. We can say loading life cycle. So let me explain that. So life cycle, very good question. So one is there is an Angular life cycle. There is an Angular life cycle. I'm not sure in this channel, must be that there is a video for Angular life cycle. I must have explained. Must be you can try to check that out, or you can check my videos on Questpond, where we have a full dedicated video on Angular life cycle. But now, let me talk about what this life cycle is. So what I will explain out here. Let me very quickly go to my whiteboard out here. So bootstrapping life cycle. Bootstrapping means how the Angular application will start first time and load it in the browser. That's what I term it as a bootstrapping life cycle. Bootstrapping. We'll not say life cycle, bootstrapping. Life cycle means, when the user goes and types something out there, what happens inside Angular, who changes where, what things happen, right? That is the Angular life cycle, right? So there is no Angular request life cycle as such, but there is something called as an Angular life cycle. This I will not take, but I'll try to cover the bootstrapping life cycle out here. Let me try to cover this, right? Very quickly, but let us go out here. Let us go to our, this is our app component, right? So bootstrapping life cycle. Okay, let me explain that. Can I go and see this in a mode which is view explorer mode? I would like to go and see that in a more right. Okay, let me do like this. Let me open this in something called as VS Code, because I wanted to, I wanted to avoid VS Code, but now I think I need to go ahead and do VS Code, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and stop this out here, and I will use VS Code. VS Code, that is one more thing which you need again to do a proper Angular application. VS Code, is again a product given by Microsoft, but it is cross-platform. It is an editor. For example, Visual Studio is an IDE, which is very specific to C#. Eclipse is an IDE, very specific to Java must be, right? It can do, Visual Studio can compile other applications, but it is not really meant for it, right? This VS Code is an editor. An editor means bare bones. He does not have any idea of C#. He does not have any idea of Angular. He says that, do you have a CLI, a command line code like csc.exe or ngnew or ngbuild, ngserve? If you have a CLI, just open this VS Code and fire your commands from the CLI and use it, right? So I'm going to go and open this in VS Code out here, VS Code, Visual Studio Code. You can Google for Visual Studio Code. And so very quickly, guys, Visual Studio Code. So that's the Visual Studio Code out there. Remember, Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio are different. Do not get confused. Just for people who are new here, there is Visual Studio. Definitely all belongs to Microsoft out here. So if you go to this thing out here, you will find that there is Visual Studio, there is Visual Studio Code, and there is Visual Studio for Mac, and so many confusions, right? This one is your old Visual Studio. If you're coming from the old ASP.NET Web Forms, this is Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio Code, which runs on Linux, which runs cross-platform, and it is an editor, right? So you need to install this Visual Studio Code out here. And in case you are confused, you think that, oh, like what should I select? You can see that they have made a small screen out here. You'll say, okay, I want to do web cloud, and I want to do only .NET, and I want to run only on Windows. You can see Visual Studio. But you say, no, I don't want to do .NET. I want to do Node.js, and I want to run on Windows, VS Code. So as soon as you switch from that something which is non-C#, right, non.NET, he just says Visual Studio Code, right? Okay, so that's so I have this VS Code out here, and I will run this. Run as admin, please run as admin, and let me open it out there, because what is happening is, those folders, it would be very difficult for me to explain. So you can see a lot of code out here. Don't worry about it. Just go and say file, open folder out here, and I'll just open this. Save. So there it is. My VS Code has opened, and you can see the same folder structure which we were seeing in the Windows Explorer. So if you want to go and fire those commands like ngserve, you can open up this new terminal. Let me show that again for people who are new terminal, right? And here you can go and you can say ngserve, right? The same kind of an output, right? So now let's talk about how this whole thing runs, right? So you can see here, this is the complete folder out here, right? And let me explain you how that bootstrapping life cycle takes place. So there was a question out there, sir, how is this bootstrapping? So here it is. First thing, what starts is the index.html page. I'm today I'll just keep my scope limited to only bootstrapping. Must be Angular lifecycle. Can be for more advanced topics, right? So this is the index.html that starts first. Index.html runs something called as main.ts. Remember that this TS is TypeScript, right? So it's a language which is a cover language on JavaScript, and it is made by Microsoft. It simplifies JavaScript. So it runs main.ts, means internally it runs main.js, frankly. So main.js runs. This main.ts then runs the module. So at this moment, our module is app module. And I said that a module is a group of component. So the module goes and kickstarts your component, which is this one, app component. Right? At this moment, we don't have a model. This app component is connected with a view. So we have an app component.html, this one, right? App component.html. So the index page loads this, he loads this, he loads this, and then this UI with everything gets loaded inside this index page into something called as a selector. So if you go to the index page very, very quickly, if you go and see the index page out here, you will find that there is something here called as a selector, app root. So inside this, it goes and it loads this UI. At this moment, our UI is welcome to first Angular application. It goes and loads this, right? And this UI is connected with the component by using this. You can see here now, this app component is a class. And you can see by using the template URL, we know that for this UI, this is the code behind. So because of this template URL, we know that this is the view and this is his code behind, right? So the connection between app HTML and the component is done by template URL, right? And you can see out here, this app component says where he wants to load. He wants to load into this selector called as app root. And that app root is inside this index page. So this is where, the selector gets loaded. So because the component knows that I have to go and load into this selector. So what happens is we go and we hit the index page first. So when I say HTTP localhost, I hit the index goes and runs the main. So this is our main.ts file. It goes and runs the main. The main runs the module. So you can see here, this main goes and invokes a syntax here called as bootstrap module, and it runs the module. The module goes and runs the component. So this is the module out here. He goes and runs the component, bootstrap, which is the first component to start. So he goes and he bootstraps this component. The component knows from the template URL whom to connect, and he knows where to load. So that's how your first bootstrapping cycle is to load Angular, right? So let me know any questions out here on the bootstrapping thing. So guys, now we have 10 minutes, and I have already, so very quickly, what were things we have done out here? Because the goal today was that I didn't want to actually run above 5 steps. So in 4 steps, I've ran the first Angular application. So we have ran the first Angular application. Also step 5, what I did is I went ahead and changed the view as well. I went and I put some HTML as well, right? So you can see it takes hardly 4 steps to start your first Angular application. And also I covered some theory out here. I talked about a component, view, model, and views, right? And also I talked about the bootstrapping lifecycle. Now what I will do is I will go back to questions, to answering questions. So this 10 minutes, let me take up, whatever are the questions, right, regarding whatever I've taught till here, right? And so bootstrapping. So first the index starts, index runs the main runs the module runs the component, and the component loads using the selector into the index, right? So let me know any questions, any queries. I'm opening up the stage for questions. Okay, so uh, uh, thank you, Dasan. Thank you, uh, thank you that Sri Lanka is a beautiful country. Thank you to log in here. Uh, Let me see any questions. Yeah, so Gaurav sir, please try to go and search on this channel out here. We have probably I've covered Angular life cycle. Probably I've covered it. And try to please go and Google. Can we change the startup file of the, or yes, you can change the startup file, right? Uh, so very quickly, that's a good question, and very much related. So yes, so you can go and you can change the startup file. If you see out here, there is a file here called as the JSON files. All of these JSON files are configuration files. For example, this is the package.json, which is for installing the dependencies. This is the tsconfig.json, which is to how your compiler will compile, right? The TypeScript compiler. And we have here something called as angular.json. So in Angular, this angular.json is related to Angular. So you can see here, you can go and you can change your file name. You can change the index file as well. So you can also change your main file as well out here. So must be you can give a try to change the file names from there. Right. So right. And let's see any more questions. Yes. Let me go back. Yeah, so Sudha, the question from Sudha here is that, sir, will you be loading this whole video out here? Yes, this video is live. It will be there for a long time out here. I would suggest to go and watch my Learn Angular video. So very quickly, if you want to really dive further out here, there are two videos which I will definitely paste it out here very quickly. One is the Learn Angular very quickly. So this is Learn Angular in 1 hour. It should really help you to I'm sorry for the ad noise out there. So this one, Sudha, out here will help you to get very quickly start with Angular. In case you are looking to crack the interviews, right? I've created an Angular interview questions and answers. It's really neat out there. I've covered like 50 or I don't know 25 or 50 questions. So that's the second link which I'm pasting out here, which are related to what are the most asked questions around Angular when you go for interviews, right? So both of those videos you can refer. We have a very in-depth course in Questpond, right? You can go and you can buy the specific course as well if you wish, right? Okay, so here's a question. So Blazor versus Angular, which is the best? So good question from Roman out here. First thing, Blazor is a new thing. Definitely, it works on the thing called as WebAssembly. But I would say that just wait for some time, let it mature. If you look at Angular, like it's been around there for 10-15 years now. So it's quite mature. It works, right? It has the performance is good. Uh, Blazor needs some more justification, some more time. So I think we should give some time for it to settle. You can start learning. Definitely, you can start learning. We have some Blazor videos also on this channel out here. But I think from the production perspective, I still give it a no at this moment. Must be 1 or 2 years down the line, when .NET Core 5.0 comes in, must be I'll have one more look at the Blazor thing, right? So must be when it is .NET 6.0 core, 6.0, there is no core after .NET 5.0, must be Blazor would be a good idea. Okay, so here it is. So some debugging steps. Okay, let me take that question. Why not? So I will just take up easy ones today, easy questions right out here, because this is completely for beginners, I can understand the desperation of a lot of people out there saying that, sir, go ahead and take more complicated classes. I want to take it. But remember that, at one end, yes, I would like to take more on performance tuning, and so on. But at the other end, we have people who are still struggling to learn Angular. So, as a teacher, I feel that I should help them as well. So very quickly, how to debug Angular. So here it is. So this is our Angular application, which is running out here, and we want to debug it. So what you can do is you can do function F12, You can do on function F12. You can go, when you do on function F12, it actually starts up the developer tools out here, and then you can go to Webpack, and inside the Webpack, you can go out here. I'm showing the very tough way of doing it, but it works, right? So here it is. You can see the first thing which loads is main.ts. So I can go and I can put a debug point here. After the main.ts, what loads is the module. So I can go and I can load out here the module. And after module, what loads is the component. So I can go and put a debug point out here, right? So if I go and do a reload, a refresh, look at this. The first debug point is out here. So you can see this is your debug. And you can also see out here, step into, step out, step over, and so on. Remember? So I can go and just say resume. So there it is. It goes. And after the main.ts, look at it. It loads the module F5. After the module, it goes and loads the component F5. There it is, your first Angular application. Again, I'll show it. Refresh, debug, hits the module main.ts F5. After the main.ts, it hits the module, hits the component. Component knows that which is the HTML to be loaded, and he loads it into that index page out there, right? So that's how you can debug. Okay, so let us see if any other questions out there. Is there a way to do unit testing in Angular? Okay, let me answer that. Guys, I'm not going to take up all the questions. So let me see whatever I can, right? I'm going to avoid questions, which are very higher end for now. It's not that I don't know it, but I don't want to answer it because people who are newcomers, they will get, completely confused with new keywords. Okay, let me take that question. Is there a way to do unit testing? Dasun, yes, absolutely. There is a way to do unit testing, as I've already explained. So I'm going to go and just resume share out here. So here it is. First is, we are talking about unit testing. So you can go to this E2E folder, end-to-end unit testing out here, right? And first thing, if you want to do unit testing, for example, over here now, you can see there is an app component.spec file. So you can go to this app component.spec file, and this component you can see here, it goes and loads your component and then says expect. This expect is like assert.r equal. This is Jasmine code. Assert.r equal, expect that the title is customer app. Expect, that this is this. So you can always go and run here ng test. So you can go and you can run here ng test the way we run ng serve. You can run ng test. Remember, this complete template of Angular is created from a very professional perspective. It has unit testing, it has E2E, it has the complete package which is needed, the bundling, the production, right? So don't try to create a template by yourself. You're messing it up, right? So that's what the unit testing is. If you want to do more, what you call runtime testing on the UI testing, like you want to send the keys and click on the buttons, then you can go and use something called as protractor. So here it is. This is protractor out here. This protractor, what it does is it will literally, it can open up the browser. It can navigate to that page. It can hit a button. It can go to the click, close a dialog box, because this protractor stands on something called as Selenium. I don't know if you heard about Selenium. Selenium is an automation testing framework. So if you want to do integration testing, UI testing, you can use this E2E. If you want to just test the unit, a component, a module, you can use this spec out here, right? So absolutely, unit testing is a part of completely of Angular, right? Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. So guys, that brings us to the end of this session. Let me see if any other questions which are pending here. Is there a way to do unit testing in Angular? Can we implement design pattern? Absolutely, Gaurav. If you look at Angular, in Angular, we have something called as TypeScript, right? So TypeScript is all like, it has classes, it has inheritance, it has it has polymorphism, I can say that. It has interfaces, it has abstract classes. So when you talk about design patterns, you really need at least the object-oriented part, which is completely a part of Angular because it embraces something called as TypeScript. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks a lot. I know that today's session was completely a basic session, for newcomers out here. But I hope that these 4 or 5 steps, which I mentioned out there, will help you to run your first Angular application, right? So again, thank you very much to come for this Sunday again. Please visit my website, questpond.com, where I keep regularly taking trainings. At this moment, we have 3 trainings which are going on. On Tuesday, we do design patterns. We are going to go and start with microservices as well. We are doing Angular MVC core, which has been running for last 3 months, right? 1 hour every week. So what I do is that when because if you do every day 1 hour, it is quite tiring, but 1 hour every week, and then the whole week you can practice. And on Saturday, we are doing AZ204. So that's what is happening on questpond.com. Please do visit, and please do go and share this video on your LinkedIn, on your Twitter. So if you're sharing it on Twitter, please do tag me. I would like to know that if you know what you have written about me, right? So thank you very much. Thanks a lot, and let us see what we can do on next Sunday, and let us try to learn something new. Thank you.